Hey Tom, there's a parrot on the terrace. Whew, it's time to drink some tea. Schools are open now, so we don't need to stay home. What's wrong with this English? Let's find out in today's lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn about aspiration. So what is an aspiration? Aspiration is a kind of air or sound that you produce through your mouth while you pronounce some of the unvoiced sounds and letters in English, such as letter T, K, P, etc. So whenever we try to pronounce these sounds, we put an air puff, or we also call it aspiration. Means we release the burst of air from your mouth before these sounds. So let's take an example. If I try to say Tom, cat, pig, you see there's a little bit of air coming from my mouth like a plosive sounds, right? And we call it aspiration. Also we call it air puff from our mouth. Let's take another example. Let's take a very light paper, put this paper in front of your mouth and try to pronounce some of these words with aspiration. So please notice this paper. Tom, cat, pig. You see, the paper is moving because there's some kind of air that is releasing from my mouth. Now let's practice all these words again without any aspiration. So let's say Tom, pig, cat. Did you notice the difference, right? When I try to pronounce this sound without any aspiration, there's no movement on this paper, means there's no air coming out from my mouth. Let's practice one more time. So first time I will try to pronounce these words with aspiration, second time without aspiration, and take a look on this movement, or the movement of this paper. Tom, Tom, cat, cat, pig, pig. Did you notice the difference? So you have to use aspiration like native speaker. Most of the native speaker using these aspiration in their daily conversation, and that's why you can actually find the difference between native speakers and non-native speaker, right? Non-native speaker usually don't use aspiration because in their own native tongues, own native languages, they don't have any aspiration in their languages, right? So that's why you can actually find the difference between a native speaker and a non-native speaker. Okay, always remember that you have to use aspiration in some of the certain cases. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about certain rules where you have to use aspiration, where you don't have to use aspiration. Also remember not to overdo that, right? I mean, it should come naturally from your mouth. You don't have to overdo like Tom or cat, like, because it sounds like that you are forcefully putting these sounds or forcefully releasing some air from your mouth. You don't have to overdo. It should come naturally from your mouth, right? So anyway, we're going to talk about all the rules. So let's get started. Before we talk about different types of rules in aspiration, let's talk about different sounds in English. So we have three different types of sounds in English. First is voiced, second voiceless, third is sibilant. Right? So voiced sounds are those sounds that we produce using our throat. For example, b, bat, or d, dog, violin. Right? So if you put your hand on your throat and try to pronounce these voiced sound, say bat, dog, you'll feel the vibration on your throat. That's why we call it voiced sound. Then voiceless sounds are those that we produce from the front part of the mouth. So we don't have to use our throat. There is no vibration while producing those sounds. So for example, I say fan, party, tree, right? So all these sounds are voiceless sound because we are producing from the front part of the mouth without any vibration from the throat. Then third type is sibilant. Sibilant sounds are kind of sound that we produce a little bit of sh sound like a snake, right? For example, say zebra, right? Or we say chess, right? Or sheet, right? So these kinds of sounds are sibilant sound. I'm going to put a chart here that describes all the sibilant versus voiceless versus voiced sounds. So you can pause the video for a minute and have a look on this chart. Now let's talk about all the rules. So when to use aspiration. Rule number 1. Whenever a word starts with letter K, C, P, and T. Remember these 4 letters, K, P, C, T. Right? Whenever a letter or a word start with all these sounds, you have to use aspiration. For example, letter T, Tom, tiger. Letter C, car, cat. Letter P, pigeon, pig. And we have letter K, kite, kangaroo, right? So whenever there is a sound which is at the start of a word, you have to use aspiration in those cases. Rule number 2, whenever there is a stress on each syllable of the word, you have to use aspiration. So for example, every word is made up of different syllables. For example, if I say attend, right? So now attend is a one word, but attend has 2 syllables, 2 parts. Attend, 2 syllables. So you see, right? Here the stress is on the second syllable, attend. So you see, because of that stress on the syllable, you have to use aspiration. So I say attend, right? So whenever there is a stress on any of the syllable, whether it's on the starting of the word or whether it's the second syllable or third syllable, it doesn't matter. Whenever there's a stress on any of the syllable in a word, you have to put stress. So for example, attend, acquire, akin, acute, appear. So see, even though these words are starting with different letter, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any stress. You still have to put stress on the second syllable. Alright, so this is a rule. Whenever there's a stress on any syllable, you have to use aspiration. Okay, now we don't have to use aspiration in some of the cases. Let's talk about rule number 3. So when all these sounds follows the letter S or sound S, then we don't have to use aspiration. All these letters like K, P, C, T, etc. And if it follows letters S or sound S, in that case, don't use aspiration. For example, if I say spy, spy is made up of 2 syllables. Is spy, right? So because the first syllable is a letter S and sound S, right? So because the second syllable follows letter S and the sound S, in that case, you don't have to say spy. No, you have to say spy. Another example, sky, escape, or let's say excuse, right? Excuse, if you see X sound S and then second syllable is cues, right? In that case, you have to say excuse, right? Excuse, spy, state, right? So in that case, never use aspiration. Rule number 4, don't use aspiration if all these sounds occur at the end of the word. So what do I mean? It means if like T, P, K, C, etc. these sounds or letter come at the end of the word, you don't have to use aspiration. For example, if I say test, so test, first syllable is stressed, right? And you have to use aspiration, T. But last syllable, test. So because it's ending with letter T, don't use aspiration because it's the ending sound. In ending sound, we never use any kind of aspiration. We say test. In the same way, if I say statement, right? Or spike, right? Make, make, or other sounds I say statistic, statistic, right? So I'm just focusing on the last sound, statistic, tick, right? So you don't have to use aspiration any kind of these sound. Student, student, right? So it's ending with T, but we don't have to use any kind of aspiration because ending sound don't have any kind of aspiration. Always remember, whenever a word ends in all this sound, don't use aspiration at the end of the word. Okay, now let's talk about final rules. So don't use aspiration when there is no stress on the syllable. Okay, so even I've seen some of the native speakers making this mistake, that they use aspiration in all the cases because they are not aware of the rule. But in general, you don't have to use aspiration in all the cases. So for example, if I say apple, apple, so there are two syllables in apple, apple, right? Because the stress is on the first syllable, a, you don't have to use aspiration on second syllable. So you have to say normally apple, apple, right? You don't have to say apple, apple. You don't have to necessarily use aspiration in all the cases, right? Apple, lucky, academic, executive, or if I say deepen, or statistic, statistic, right? Right? So first, you don't have to use aspiration because it follows letter S, and second syllable because syllable stress is on the first syllable and second syllable statistic, right? In that case, you don't have to use aspiration. It comes naturally, right? Because when you are speaking fluently in English, and you can't use aspiration in those cases because you can't speak fluently if you use aspiration in all the cases. So remember, don't use aspiration when there is no stress on the syllable. In the end, I'm also going to talk about one more thing. So we use aspiration for sound ch. We call this sound ch, right? So the rule is same, like we talked about other rules, is the same rule applies on this sound as well. The only difference is there's not too much aspiration on this sound. For example, if I say child, chin, right? So you see there's a little bit of aspiration, but not too much like other sounds. So if I say achieve, achieve, chin, child, right? So you see a little bit of aspiration, but you can use it. Of course, same rules. You don't have to use aspiration when it comes at the end of the sound, right? So I say bench, munch, right? In that case, don't use aspiration for ch. So same rule for this sound as well, but you can use aspiration in that case as well. Now we'll practice to pronounce all the words correctly. Have a look on the screen. Talk, time, plot, pig, kite, cry, chat, chair, acquire, attend, appear, akin, achieve, opium, statistic, principles, executive, mat, rap, pick, make, bench, state, system, conspire, discard, spread. Now let's practice some of the sentences in the correct way. Hey Tom, there's a parrot on the terrace. Hey Tom, there's a parrot on the terrace. Whew, it's time to drink some tea. It's time to drink some tea. Schools are open now, so we don't need to stay home. Schools are open now, so we don't need to stay home. So that's all for today, and I hope you got some valuable information from the lesson. And if you like the video, please share. Feel free to like and subscribe as well. And I hope to see you in my next video. So until then, goodbye.